masterclass. It is a masterclass on the builder track, as you probably found out from or figured it out from the title. This will be about how to build on Nym. So I have with me today Alexia, who you've already met. Hey, and also
Hey
Max,
everyone.
who's also from the DevRel team. Hey Max, how's it going? And
Good,
who got
thanks, man.
away got away with not presenting so far on Shipyard, so we're changing that right now. All right. With all of that said, I'm going to hand over real quick this time. I'm not going to do a whole long intro because we got to make sure that we're on time. Because for those of you who are not following the other tracks, there's going to be another masterclass coming right after this one, back to back. It's going to be about running an exit node, yet again by someone from the beautiful DevRel team, Sarinko, who you already know from his presentation earlier during level 2. So the one thing that I'm going to say before we get started, as usual, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So make sure to leave your questions either here in the YouTube or Twitch chats, or you can also use the Nym Matrix server if you want to preserve your privacy and not log in with your Google account. You can use the general channel of the Nym Matrix server, and we're going to keep an eye out there as well, and we're going to be asking your questions at the end. With all of that said, I'm going to bring on my screen and let's get started. Who's starting?
It's me.
All right,
Hello,
take it
people.
away, Alexia.
Hello, beautiful community. Okay, cool. So today we're going to walk you through different ways of building on Nym. And the idea of this track for us is basically to get builder feedback on our SDKs so far, because as you know, we've been working on them for quite a while now. See what works well, see what the limitations are, and what we need to improve on our side. So of course, feel free to ask every question you have. We'll do our best to answer them. And basically like make sure your experience building on Nym is as frictionless as possible. Next slide, please, Sudo. So today, what we're going to see are basically, we're basically going to walk you through some general quick reminders that we may have seen on some earlier presentations. But for those of you who weren't there, it's always good to have these in mind. We're going to introduce you the TypeScript SDK first. Then Max is going to run you through the Rust SDK. And then we're going to have a hackathon deep dive with Max as well. So first part, Sudo, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the quick reminders. Next slide. Thank you. So as you'll know by now, Nym is a decentralized and incentivized network level privacy infrastructure. And the most important points to remember here is that the different elements of our privacy infrastructure, namely the Mixnet, the token, the ZK NIMS, and the blockchain, are here to ensure that network data transmission and transactions are made private. So I'm not going to run into the details of each of these elements again, because I assume that if you're here, you already have an idea of how they work. But it was just to give you a little refresher on like what we are and how we're structured, basically. Next slide, please, Sudo. Oops, sorry. Okay, so, oops. Here is a little refresher on what network layer means. And this is a little slide that we've put together, which is a simplified version of the official 7 layers OSI model, which stands for the Open System Interconnection, which is a conceptual framework that is used to understand and standardize how different networking protocols and technology interact within computer networks. And again, when we say that we work at a network layer, what we mean is, well, you can see it visually. And what that means is that in terms of interaction or interoperability, we can basically be applied to anything that's above us. So anything application layer, whether it stands within the realm of Web3 or not. Next slide, please, Sudo. And that is basically what I mean. So Nym as an infrastructure can be used to power both Web 2 and Web 3 applications. And here we have a list of different types of applications that we've seen in the previous presentations. For example, for Web 2, we could think about, you as a builder could think about anything secure messaging apps related, secure document sharing, for example, anonymous blogging and publishing, microblogging, email services, file storage, etc. And for Web3, we could envision some more specific things related to Web3 wallets, infrastructure, RPC service providers, privacy L2s, etc., etc. So the main message here being that Nym is not only used for blockchain-related applications, but also for anything that requires network-level privacy, as we've mentioned earlier. Next slide, please, Sudo. So why would I use, and by I mean like I as a builder, so why would I use the Nym infrastructure? So basically, to build, to power existing apps or existing services by rerouting the app traffic through the Nym Mixnet, for example, or by building new apps, privacy apps and services. Using either one of our SDKs or one of our clients, for example. Next slide, please, Sudo. So this is also, sorry, a little slide that we've seen earlier, building, using, or integrating with Nym. So if we are, as builders, talking about building, the most obvious things that we've built internally for you to use would be either the TypeScript SDK, the Rust SDK, or the standalone clients. And we're going to get into the intricacy of each in a little bit. But basically, what you can do with the TypeScript SDK at a very high level is use a tool called MixFetch, query or execute methods on the Nym smart contracts, send and receive traffic through the Nym Mixnet, and buy and consume ZK credentials. With the Rust SDK is broadly the same, but Max will get into the details of this. And then we have the standalone clients. We have 3 clients, as you know, and we'll get into the details of them in a little bit. If you wanted to use Nym components and not necessarily build as an end user, it would be more looking into the ZK Nyms and Nym Connect. The ZK Nyms are going to come very soon. And finally, integrating the easiest way would be through MixFetch, although arguably you could also do this using the SDKs or the standalone clients. Next slide, please, Sudo. And so here we have a little overview of the clients that each SDK supports. So for the Rust SDK, for example, it'd be the WebSocket and SOX5, and for the TypeScript, it'd be the WebAssembly one. Next slide, please, Sudo. Thank you. Next slide again. So in regards to the TypeScript SDK, again, so as a builder, what can I do with it? So basically right now, 4 things, well, 3 in fairness, but very soon 4. So I can use MixFetch, which is basically, well, you can use it to proxy request through the Mixnet. The idea of MixFetch is that it works in the same way as the normal fetch function. It's kind of a proxy wrapped around this function. It has a few catches that are documented in the official documentation that we will link back to that in a bit. So I don't know if that made sense. Yes, it must have. The second point are the Nym smart contracts. So again, like, as a builder, you would have the ability to query and execute methods on the Nym smart contracts. You can proxy traffic apps, through the Nym Mixnet. And very soon, as a builder, you will have the ability to create and consume zero-knowledge credentials, which we call ZK Nyms. Next slide, please, Sudo. And so all this documentation and these details can be found on the official TypeScript SDK documentation. The way in which this documentation is structured is well, mostly it gives you an overview of the SDK. It goes into the different installation details. You have step-by-step tutorials for each of the components. You also have live examples for each of the components that you can test directly on this documentation, and then a few bundling details. Everything is explained here and was meant to be done as easily and clearly as possible. But if you have questions, of course, feel free to get back to us and we'll help however we can. Note that this documentation is still in beta mode, but again, with every comment and every feedback that we will have from you, we will be improving it. So just keep in mind that it's a work in progress, basically. Next slide, please, Sudo. You will see, well, this is an important point that I wanted to make, but everything is detailed in the documentation. You will see that the TypeScript SDK encompasses different clients that themselves come in different variations. So you basically have the ESM, the CGS, and each of them come in two different flavor, the simple and the pre-bundle ones. So depending on the nature of the app and the way in which you want to structure your project, you will be using one or the other. Next slide, please, Suda. Oh. So mixfetch. As I mentioned earlier, mixfetch is, well, can be understood or seen as a drop-in replacement for the fetch API. But with one difference, which is quite obvious, is that the patterns that would ordinarily be exposed are not protected because they're routed through the mixnet. And through the SDK, oh, sorry, we can go through the next slide. Sudo. Oh, no. Thank you. The way in which you'd use it as a builder is basically you'd install the client. And then here I just gave a high-level overview of the different methods that you would have for this specific tool. The documentation should walk you through it in a manner that'd be easy enough, to use and to understand as a builder. And it's literally, I mean, the changes that you would have in between mix, fetch, and fetch are, how can I, very easy or very simple. But I believe that CGI, which is one of the builders that we have within the Nym community, who has built different tools that most of you builders may already be aware of, will actually walk you through it step by step tomorrow. Next slide, please, Sudo. So now when it comes to the mixnet client, so as you all know, the mixnet client provides extremely robust protection against network level surveillance. And from a traffic perspective, what happens is that on your local machine, so you've got your apps code and your Nym client, which does most of all the heavy lifting, but we'll see all the detail of what the client does in the next slide. So all that gets sent to the first gateway. It then hops into, well, throughout the different mix nodes, and then gets sent to the exit gateway, and then to the service provider machine. Next slide, please, Sudo. And so when your application communicates with the mixnet, it's not the app itself that is talking directly to the mixnet, but is one of the Nym clients. And so what do these clients do? Basically a lot of things and most of the heavy lifting, but they basically determine the network topology. They register and they authenticate with a gateway. They receive and they decrypt messages from that gateway. They create layer encrypted Sphinx packets. They send the Sphinx packets with real messages. They also send Sphinx packets with cover traffic, and they retransmit an acknowledged packet sense. Next slide, please. Thanks, Sudo. And so to be able to use this mixnet client, well, you would have to, again, do the following. So install the client, and then here you have a little example of all the different methods that you could use when interacting with that client. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next component of the SDK is the Nym smart contract. So again, interacting with that client, you would have the ability to query or execute different sort of methods on the different smart contracts that we have. And here we have a list of a few of them, but really the two that you as a builder would interact the most with are the mixnet client listed here, and the vesting client potentially. Next slide, please, Sudha. And again, to install to interact with the smart contract client, what you need to do is to install it with this command. And then here you get an overview of all the methods that would be the most, an example of some methods that you could use to interact with this client. Next slide, please, Sudha. Thank you. And now, sorry, for the ZK Nyms. So most of you must know it by now, but ZK Nyms are privacy enhanced credentials that are based on something which we call Coconut, which is a cryptographic signature scheme that allows to do, mostly 4 different things at the moment. So threshold issuance, which basically allows signature generation to be split up across multiple nodes, ensuring decentralization. It allows to do selective disclosure of attributes. So as a user, if you want to use a credential but not necessarily disclose everything that this credential holds, you can do that through selective disclosure. Re-randomization of signatures, which basically means that this signature scheme gives us the ability to create signatures that are equivalent to the first one, but not linkable to it. So you'd basically be able to reuse these credentials multiple times in different contexts without them being kind of linked to each other. And then blind signatures, which basically means that the signer can't see what he's signing. So this ensures highest levels of privacy for the user. Next slide, please, Sudha. Another important point that we wanted to mention that applies not only to the TypeScript SDK, but also to the Rust SDK is that depending on your app's use case, you as a builder may need to run a service provider. What is important to note is that the network requester, for example, is a type of service provider. And again, depending on the complexity of your app's use case, you may or may not need to run one. So the first case is you may not need one at all, so no service provider needed. And this would only happen in the context of you running like a simple P2P, a purely P2P application. The second case is when you may need a network requester and may have the ability to just use an existing one. So as you know, like network requester have an allow list. We're going to change that very soon. But for now, some of the endpoints that you use may need to be added to this allow list. And what you can do is just add it to one of the list of an existing network requester. But if your use case is a bit more complex, then it may actually be easier for you to run your own service provider. So you'd have the ability to just add all your endpoints there. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so now another questions that you may ask yourselves is, how can I integrate Nym into an existing infrastructure? And if we take a sort of TS SDK perspective, the easiest tool for now would be to try to use mix fetch. So if your TypeScript or JavaScript apps relies on fetch for its network traffic and remote connection, mix fetch is absolutely something that you can use and is potentially the easiest approach. One level down and a tad more complex is if the existing app that you're trying to integrate Nym in is written in TypeScript or JavaScript or Rust, you can use one of our existing SDKs. And if you've answered no to all of the above, then you can try by using one of our standalone clients. Everything is actually detailed on the link that has been added on this slide. So feel free to have a read. And in case of any sort of doubt, sorry, feel free to ask us and send us your questions. Next slide, please, Studio. Oh, thank you. And now I'll let Max take over.
Cool. Thank you very much. So yeah, moving on to the REST SDK itself. At the moment, the REST SDK, it fulfills you can think of the different clients that Nym has, right? We have the WebAssembly client. This is essentially what the TypeScript SDK is mostly is focusing on. And the REST SDK is kind of exposing the functionality of the other two standalone clients that, if you've been around for a while, you may have seen, the WebSocket client and the SOX5 client, right? So the Rust SDK itself, it does many of the same things that the TypeScript one does, but in Rust, okay? So you can import and interact with your clients, both as any other kind of dependency, but it also means you can manage the actual client process. So the kind of the startup process, your key management, all of this in the application logic of your app, right? As I said, excuse me, we have also split this way of splitting up the SDKs into different components, Mixnet, Coconut, and Validator. For the moment, we only have the Mixnet component with the Rust SDK as well. There are some bindings for the Validator client too, which I'll go into a bit later on in this presentation. And also, if you have any questions, ask me. So Crates.io, for Rust developers who are listening, Crates.io is, well, for non-Rust developers who are listening, I assume Rust devs know this as well, but Crates.io is basically kind of the crates are what Rust calls its dependencies, and Crates.io is essentially a library that details the different dependencies that exist and also are essentially where you can import them from, right? So the SDK isn't on Crates.io yet. This is partially because we are kind of finishing off we're finishing off some of the stuff in the back end, right? Before we kind of put everything on crates.io. Now, you can still import it if you go to the Rust SDK docs, which on the docs, all of the links are at the end of this, so don't worry. You can import it just from GitHub as well, and there's a bunch of examples there of kind of recommended ways of doing it, or if you want to, for whatever reason, if you want to import like a particular branch or a particular commit even of the SDK and the associated Nym libraries that come with it, right? And yeah, validator and credential functionality is coming soon. So if you want to interact with the Cosmos chain, there are some other imports that you can do, but you can actually do this right now. There's a tutorial. The tutorial is linked at the end of this. So if we go to the next slide. Great. So yeah, the SDK docs. At the moment, the Rust SDK doesn't have its own book quite yet. Once this is a bit more fleshed out, then we'll probably do something similar to the TypeScript docs and kind of make it its own site. At the moment, it's still in the kind of canonical nymtech.net/docs site. Next slide, please. So what's the structure of these docs? You have the overview, the installation and versioning that I was just saying, how you import it from GitHub. And then you also have your message types. So the different types of messages that you can use to send through the Mixnet. We also have helpers. So these are helper functions. The way, because Rust is obviously quite a, it's a low-level language, it's a systems programming language, then, under the hood, all of the stuff that Alexia was just talking about that clients do under the hood, a lot of this can be exposed to you as a developer if you want it to be, right? And because of that, the client at the moment functions in a way that maybe isn't completely expected or is maybe somewhat idiosyncratic. So because of that, there's also a page with some helpers, and linked to that, by message helpers, I mean kind of helper functions that in writing the tutorial or writing other bits of code, then, we've kind of reused and we think would be helpful for developers. Troubleshooting, obviously very linked to the message helpers. The message helpers are there also to avoid you needing to troubleshoot, but troubleshooting some common problems, how to avoid them or fix them. And then there's also a bunch of example code, because example code obviously is one of the best ways of jumping into something. So we have different examples of doing stuff all the way from just sending a simple message through the MixNet to manually managing your key storage, using anonymous replies with subs, with single-use reply blocks, using the SOX5 functionality, the proxy functionality, and then there's also an example cargo file, so an example kind of like base dependency file that you can use as like the basis of your project if you wanted to start building with the SDK. What we also have as well is the chain query as service tutorial, which is a very simple tutorial based on a demo of how you interact with a Cosmos SDK based blockchain, and that is on the developer portal. Next slide, please. I've lost the presentation.
Me too, I think yeah.
There we go, we're back. Yeah, cool. So, interesting question. Let's see if I actually forgot any of the examples. Yes, okay, cool. So there's also some examples of using a custom network. This is probably not necessary for the majority of people. This is probably for people maybe who are doing research or kind of stuff like traffic benchmarking. And then we also have an example of split send and receive. So this is good if you kind of essentially want to split up your client application process, and you have one client sending somewhere and the other one, which is listening out, receiving messages as well. So if we could go to the next slide. Cool. So that's an overview of the SDK. Alexia covered the majority of it, as well as how clients work. There's a kind of quite a big reformatting or a bit of a refurbishment of the standalone client documentation as well, which is incoming. It's currently the pull request is currently in review, so expect that either later today or tomorrow. And what I will do now is I'll do a bit of an overview of the practicalities of the hackathon. Right. So if we go to the next slide, please. So there is a general timetable. This is on the Shipyard Builder track, which I'm sure you've already been on. If not, just go to shipyard.nimtech.net and you will get there. Now, there's a bunch of stuff happening. The important dates are tomorrow. No Trust Verify, who are a member of the community that I'm sure most of you will have seen or come across before. They've been here for a long time, and they've already built a bunch of cool stuff. They're going to be doing a talk tomorrow, actually, on building on Nym from the perspective of someone who outside of Nym. The day after, on Thursday, then Rose O'Leary from DarkFi is going to be doing a fireside chat with Jaya and Sudo as well, I believe, on privacy narratives. So kind of taking a step back from the practicalities of actually building and talking more about maybe why and how we're building this and how we're doing it. The next week, this is the deadline for your code submissions. I'm going to be going over the submission guidelines, kind of what we expect, what we'd like to see after this. And then on Thursday the 16th, then we're also going to be having people present their projects as well. One additional thing to add is every day, aside from Friday, then from 11 to 1 in UTC, I believe I've just worked that out right, we're going to be having a DevRel office hour. So basically, if you have a problem or you want to talk not async, not in the chat, then I will be sat in a Jitsi call. And if you have any problems, questions, things you want to discuss, then you're more than welcome to just join that call. And we can talk about it. It's not going to be an appointment-based thing. It's going to be a kind of first come, first served, just open conversation. Although obviously you can also use the builder track channel on Matrix for your for async communications and chatting to everyone else. Next slide, please. Cool. So the practicalities now of what we're actually expecting from submissions. So all of this information, by the way, is on the Shipyard website. So don't feel the need to have to quickly write everything down on a screenshot or anything. It's all there. There are three different areas, right, that we're wanting to see people kind of build in and specify. The first of these is tooling, so developer tooling, or just tooling in general surrounding Nym, right? So this might not be an application itself, but it's kind of what would be a tool for users, for operators or devs, you know, to just make their lives easier, to streamline the process of actually using this stuff. Maybe it's a UX, so like a user experience kind of thing, so like a dashboard, some kind of staking facilitation tool, you know, and there's a bunch of examples of these as well. Pwnflake's great. Explore Nym dashboard is really, really helpful there. Notice Verify also have a fantastic dashboard for their mix nodes and like showing, you know, how much traffic is moving through the mixnet, as well as the is Nym up site, which is, you know, always great to have. One thing I will note is with dashboards in particular, because we already have a bunch of dashboards and we already have a bunch of very good dashboards, then if, you know, a submission in this category, you know, is a lot less open. So, you know, it would have to be like kind of solving quite a specific problem that the existing stuff doesn't really solve or deal with, right? One other thing to note as well, if you already have an existing tool or a project or something that you've been working on, then you're more than welcome to also submit an improvement that you make to that, right? And in the guidelines, you know, we go over this as well. So that's moving on from user experience kind of tooling. So operator-centric tools, right? Maybe you want to work out what your APY or like kind of estimate what your APY would be based on a variety of costs or a variety of factors that might move as well. Maybe you want to have a high and a low estimate for like how, you know, what is the actual return that you could make off running a mixed node, running a gateway, running an exit gateway, all of this kind of stuff, right? And then finally, we also have dev tooling. So, you know, a lot of developer tooling, I think, comes from pain points that devs have, and then they kind of usually will write a bash script or some weird little script that they'll kind of write themselves, and then that gets turned into an actual tool, because chances are, if you as a dev have hit some kind of pain point, then other people probably will as well, right? So this is a chance to flesh those out, you know, and to build those into larger things. Maybe you also want to, I don't know, maybe you want to create a script for setting up like a test network, you know, especially if you're using the REST SDK. We've already talked about how there's an example where you can use a different network topology. You can use a different set of mixed nodes and gateways. Maybe you want to build a script that easily sets those 3 things up, those 5 things up, you know. Or the bigger one, and this is a far bigger one, but it would obviously be really cool, is, you know, say you want to have all of the advantages of using an SDK, right? But you're building in Go or C or something like this, right? So one of the things that you could look at there would be how, using FFI, you could have the bindings from one of these clients, but use to call application code in another language, right? This is maybe a crazier one, but it would just be really cool to see. We've had a lot of people already asking about Go bindings. There's some discussion of C bindings as well. This is something that I personally am also starting to look into right now. So yeah, it would be great to see. So that's tooling. The second type of submission that we think people could do are integrations, right? And this is going back to what Alexia was just talking about with MixFetch. You know, MixFetch is the best example of this, because it's kind of a drop-in replacement for an existing thing. So, you know, if you have an app that maybe uses fetch, or you have an app, for instance, that speaks or is able to use any of the SOX 5, 4A, or 4 proxy protocols, then, you know, maybe you could think of having that application run its network traffic over Nym. You know, so actually having an integration whereby an existing app is able to send network traffic over Nym. A general rule of thumb as well with applications, if it can talk to Tor, so if it has a, you know, use Tor mode, then it will speak SOX 4A, which means that you could use the SOX client to, instead of Tor, use Nym. Alternatively, you know, if you think of the messaging logic of Nym, it's maybe you have a messaging logic that isn't HTTP based, so maybe fetch wouldn't work. Or alternatively, you're using something like request, maybe, which is kind of the Rust version of fetch to a certain extent. You could then also look at building something bespoke as well, if you feel like diving in a bit deeper. And the third one, which is similar to integrations, but somewhat different, is kind of a new app, right, that utilizes Nym. Either one of the SDKs or one of the standalone clients. Like I said, the standalone client, the WebSocket client documentation is going to be fleshed out. The new docs for that will hopefully be deployed either this afternoon or tomorrow. And this is a new kind of app, and here it's good to think of strategic uses. Where is that gap? Where is that pain point that a small introduction of using the Mixnet would really help? So a good example of this is TorBirdie, which was a Thunderbird extension that basically allowed you to send all of your email traffic from Thunderbird over Tor. So I don't know, maybe you could build something like NymBirdie, right? Just ideas like this. And there's a bunch of ideas that are also written down on the developer portal, stuff like Magic Wormhole, Sync Thing, all of these kinds of apps that are already either kind of trying to push forward in this kind of like Libra or open source autonomous tech, or just kind of that could do with a bit of extra privacy, like everything could do with a bit of extra network privacy. Next slide, please. Cool. So what are we expecting? First one, big thing, obviously, working code demos that are hosted publicly, GitLab, GitHub, another Git instance thing, SourceForge, whatever, it doesn't really matter, so long as the code demo is there and it's hosted in a way that it can be cloned and used, right? We're looking for quality over quantity here. So it's far better to submit like a contained, working, well-documented proof of concept over something that tries to do too much and is messy and is poorly explained and poorly presented. All right, so the repo must be open source, preferably Libra, but whatever, up to you, and able to be used and modified by others. And the license for doing so is up to you. The publication license that you want to publish it under, that's up to you. Yeah, like I said before, so if you already have an existing app or a project, but you want to extend it, you want to use this as an opportunity to build something specific and extend those things, then that's fine. If you're going to do this though, please make sure that you actually, when you submit, there's quite a detailed account of what it is you've actually added to this project in terms of the functionality or whatever you fleshed out. And obviously, if you're using Git, then yes, you can see all the commits and stuff, but just make it as easy as possible for us to be able to see what the the kind of pre-hackathon version was and the new one. I don't know, maybe do it on a different branch, something like this, right? Just to make it as clear as possible to us. And one of the other big points, now, obviously, as someone who spends a lot of his working time writing documentation, I'm obviously going to say this, but proper documentation is another very big thing that we want to see from submissions, right? So if it's an app or if it's a tool or something, how do you install it? How do you run it? How are you expecting it to be used? And also an overview of what exactly it's doing, maybe what the architecture is. Okay, are you relying on other things for this? Is this possibly a problem? All of these kinds of things are stuff that we don't need an exhaustive amount on, but we need to see this kind of documented, right? And if instead you're building something like a UI-based thing, maybe you're building like a dashboard-based thing, something like this, it would be good to be able to run it locally as well. Then, obviously you don't have to, it's great if you do, but don't feel that you also need to, buy a domain name and kind of do all of this kind of stuff for it. We're happy to accept staging deployments. I don't know if you want to, staging deployment via Versal or something like this, but yeah, being able to run it locally ourselves when we're kind of looking through submissions takes priority over that, right? And for both of them, also just a brief bit of like, what problems does this actually solve? Where is the gap in existing applications, or what is a problem with an existing application that this is solving, right? Finally, please make sure that your app works on commonly reproducible system environments, right? So if you're deving on, an exotic Arctic Linux on ARM build or something, just please double check that you, in the documentation or in the README, you include like the necessary dependencies for more vanilla-based stuff, just like Debian, basic Arch, something like this, right? And also, if you're deving on Windows, if you can make sure that it also, you could use it on another OS as well, that would be great. Partially just because the vast majority of us do not have Windows computers to be able to run this on. Yes, and wherever possible, try and include build instructions for a variety of operating systems. If you're talking about vanilla stuff, then even between Arch and Debian, basic libraries just have slightly different names. All of this, nothing too crazy, but that's that will just streamline the process of us looking through them. If we could go to the next slide, please, Sudo. Cool, and useful links. So the timetable is on the Shipyard website. We have our general documentation, which is basically, they're just nimtech.net/developers is the dev portal, docs is the docs, operators is the operators guides, quite easy to remember. The SDKs, the REST SDK is in our main documentation site for the moment still. The TypeScript SDK has its own subdomain, so that's sdk.nimtech.net, and the standalone clients are also in the main docs. And basically most of the information I've just gone through is also on the developers portal in the Shipyard subsection of that. So if you need to check anything, you can just go there and check it, and it's a bit more fleshed out as well, with the different the three different kind of not tracks necessarily, but the three different areas that we are kind of wanting to bundle different things into: tooling, integrations, and Nimified apps. Then there's also a bunch of examples there as well to give you a bit of inspiration. And on the developer portal, you will also find a bunch of examples of existing stuff that people in the community have built as well, which you can use as inspiration too. Next slide, please. Cool, and that's it. So yes, if we can, any questions?
I'm muted. Excellent presentation, guys. Thanks for that. I'm also super excited about the hackathon shaping up to be interesting. All right, I have a bunch of questions from the community. Let's dive straight into them, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So I think the first question is for me from Friends. Thanks for the question, Friends. I would like to ask if some of us who are not who did not participate in level 1 and level 2 will be able to participate in upcoming events. Quick answer: yes. Please make sure to check out the live stream from yesterday where we introduced level 3 with Jaya and explained it in quite a bit of detail. And also make sure to check out the shipyard.nimtech.net website where you can find more info. All right, next one is for you guys though, and I think you sort of already answered this, and the hackathon itself may be the answer, but the question is from Papu, and it says, can we create a full web browser with Nym integration in the future?
So I said, okay, so it's an interesting question. Theoretically, then there's nothing to necessarily stop you. However, this kind of goes to, this kind of relates to the answer of another common question we get, which is the difference between Nym and Tor, not necessarily on an architectural level, but like how you would use it. And this is a good example. The browser is a good example, right, of this different architecture in action, so to speak. Because Tor, you have onion routing, yeah, you have multi-hop root-based encryption, right? which is there to unlink stuff like your IP address, the IP address of the sender from the receiver, and kind of give you some metadata protection, right? Versus Nym, where you break everything into packets and you route the packets individually. Now, one of the things that comes out, or one of the results of this different architecture is that Tor is maybe better for streaming-based stuff, or for stuff like web browsing, right? Nym is a bit better for asynchronous stuff where if a packet's dropped or that extra bit of latency isn't really you're not going to feel that, Whereas if in a browser situation, you would probably feel it a bit more and it would be a bit more difficult. So you could do it, but architecturally, I'm not sure it necessarily makes sense. One of the other things I'll say there is, the Nym VPN is this is why, or this is one of the reasons that the Nym VPN is going to be great as well, because the VPN is going to kind of capture all of your network traffic, including your browser traffic, right? And then you can choose the certain things that you want to have that bit of extra protection for, but also those certain things that are a bit more asynchronous, like chat applications, Matrix, for instance. You can run Matrix over the MixNet, barely notice the difference. Emails, all of this kind of stuff you can run through the MixNet. So theoretically you could, however, I don't think it would necessarily be you could do something like you could build a Nym specific browser that uses the VPN, but then at the same time, there's a bunch of other good browser projects out there already. LibreWolf, Brave, there's another one as well, which I'm completely blanking on. And then you could just run those through the Nym VPN. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Definitely does. And just to highlight one of my favorite features when it comes to the Nym VPN, although it will come a bit later with the initial release, but split tunneling is definitely how Max just explained, the fact that you're going to be able to select the MixNet for asynchronous stuff where latency is not that important, but privacy is very important. You'll be able to do that, and then the VPN for the rest of the things. So I'm really looking forward to that. Now, folks, we have quite a few amazing questions. And like I said, I will have a hard stop because I'm going to be hosting the next event today about operating exit nodes. So from this point forward, I'm going to focus on questions related to the hackathon specifically, because I think those are kind of important. So, question from Papu. Papu is always asking really good questions. Do you have any favorite apps you'd like to see as a result of the hackathon?
I would, these are actually, they're on the shipyard document, they're on the documentation, on the portal documentation already as kind of suggestions. But something like NimBirdie would be great. I know for a fact that Magic Wormhole, which is a file transfer application, that has a Rust library. That would be sick to see that over the MixNet. Sync thing is quite a cool tool. It's a way of keeping kind of different devices in sync, or different folders of devices in sync, but it's not a cloud storage mechanism, right? It just sends them between the two devices. That would also be amazing to run over Nym. There was a very cool project I found recently, which is setting up a mesh network called Qual, Q-U-A-L, that uses Rustlib P2P. That would also be very, very cool to see. Those are my highest recommendations. And like I said, they're all on the dev portal as well, in the examples of the hackathon challenges. So yeah.
Sounds cool. I think we have time for 2 more questions. One of them is from Rocio, who's also been asking pretty good questions. Do we need to present a script or app, or can it just be an idea with a very small demo?
I don't really understand how you do a demo without having.
I guess some conceptual, I don't know, framing or. Yeah, I'm with you.
No, it's it is a hackathon, so proof of concepts, absolutely fine. It's a week and a half, so we're not expecting like a fully fleshed out thing. However, we are expecting code.
All right, makes sense. Now, another good one from Max, Max 273. If I have a proprietary app that I want to integrate Mixfetch with, how do I show the integration without showing the app's code?
I mean, like we said, you know, the submissions have to be open source, really. So, yeah, that's one of the prerequisites, unfortunately.
So no proprietary stuff for this one, right?
No, it has to be open source. It has to be able to be used by others. It has to be able to be publicly hosted. So, yeah.
All right, makes sense. Since that was a quick one, I think we can scram in one more. So Matthew, aka Palmflake, is asking, who we mentioned earlier. Hi, Palmflake. Always good
Hey,
to see
Palmflake.
you. I'm new to Rust. Is it okay to ask questions around more general Rust when incorporating Rust SDK? Questions during the office hours?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Like I said, you know, the office hours are, yeah, just come, ask away. We can do some learning together. Yeah, all good.
Ooh, there's another one by Matt, which I get from community members quite often. So I'm also going to ask this one. Is there a place to get info on developing Nix smart contracts? Do you guys know?
Yeah, okay. So Nix smart contracts. Where would you go? Yeah, I mean the Nix smart contracts, right, are just customizing contracts for the moment. Okay, there's nothing bespoke to Nix quite yet. So yes, go to the Cosmism documentation. They have a really good set of example contracts. They also have like a good kind of like builders MD book as well. Everyone as well, actually, if you join the Shipyard Builders channel on Matrix, then yeah, these kinds of questions as well, feel free to drop them in and I'll just reply async and drop links and all of this kind of stuff for you. You can also check out the contracts in the mono repo as well. And there's a bunch of contracts there. There's a couple of contracts that haven't been deployed yet, including Nym DNS, which is very cool. It means you don't have to always link your service to a big gnarly Nym address. It's, you can pick more of a domain kind of thing. Yeah, so go there. But also, if you ask in the Shipyard Builders channel, and everyone who wants to build, please join that, and then we'll kind of also communicate through there. Then yeah, just feel free to ask these questions as well, and I'll drop links and replies as and when I see them.
All right, thanks for that. I guess that's all we had time for today. Thank you for the answers, guys. Excellent presentation as well, and thanks for the good questions from the community as well.
Yeah,
thanks
look
everyone.
forward to seeing what you build, guys. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and hopefully see some of you in the office hours as well.
Which are going to be there's some fake news circulating on our channels. Some people, it's not actually fake news. We shared the wrong times initially. So if you ever hear that there's going to be an office hour on Friday, there isn't going to be. So office hour DevRel office hours are only going to be tomorrow and the day after. So that's Wednesday and Thursday. Okay, guys.
And then Monday, Tuesday next week as well.
Yeah, also that. All right, big thanks for coming on, guys. Let me do my quick exit presentation where I will have one more question for you, as usual. So, as usual, we have a POAP for this event. So if you want to claim your POAP for today, then you need to use this secret phrase. And it's becoming a tradition here on the on Shipyard lectures and masterclasses that we always pick one that is relevant to the talk. This one was chosen by Alexia. So why did you choose this phrase as the secret phrase?
These are flags that we're using in the TypeScript SDK, but people will see it. And they're linked to the new packages that were published late last night. And I thought it was nice as, a little word for this POAP.
On point, relevant indeed. All right, folks, so to claim your POAP, you gotta go to nymtech.net/go/POAP. I'm also going to be sharing the link in the chat just now.
I think there's a typo on your little keyword here on the secret word.
It is. You've got an extra E in force.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys.
It should be force CLS.
Thank you. Thanks for catching that. So force CLS. I also typed it in chat. So use this one. You only have 15 minutes to claim as usual, because we want to reward people who actually attended this event. Can't wait to see the stuff that you're building. And if you are also participating in the node operator track of Shipyard, then make sure to come to the other masterclass that is coming up right after this one. I'm also sending a link to that in chat. See you all there. Once again, huge thanks for the questions, and also big thanks for the presentation, guys. Absolutely lovely stuff.
Thank you, Sido. Thanks, everyone.
And join the Builders channel on Matrix, guys, and I will be hanging out there.
And join the Matrix server in general. It's pretty important stuff. All right, guys. Catch you later.
See you later. Ciao, everyone.